Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Inside Out. I'm Cristina Villalon.
I'm Ricardo Alvarez Diaz, the husband.
And we're back. We're going to tell you a little bit today. We're going to talk about some of the skills we feel are needed when you exit the architecture and interior design school part
Right.
of the profession.
Well, that came about because we kept getting calls from people asking if students could come in when they were in high school and shadow people in the firm and learn a little bit about what the profession of architecture and interior design was. Of course, that's really inefficient because if you get 50 calls from people, we do have to work sometimes. So
It's hard to do too because the days vary so much. They're very different, and so you might get a great day or you might get kind of a crappy day. We don't want to dissuade anyone from the profession.
No,
right?
no, and we felt that it was actually we felt it was important to actually showcase what we did as a firm, but also what they can expect if they chose to study either architecture or interior design. So we had a couple of sessions. We were supposed to have one session.
So, well, we came up with this format.
Yes.
We call them AD&V Advantage Nights. And basically, we're inviting high school students from 9th to 12th grade to learn about the architecture and interior design professions.
Correct. And we opened one session, which was over 100 people.
Sold out within about an hour.
Yeah, that was surprising.
Just nice. So obviously there's interest in the profession. This is good.
This is good. But the other thing is that we kept getting the same calls afterwards because now it's like, oh, how can I get my kid into the session instead of how can I go and spend a whole day with you guys? So we ended up doing 3 sessions. And it was great because we're able to not only showcase the firm and also educate people about the profession. We were educated, actually. And we learned many of the concerns students have and some of the areas that we felt, especially I think by the second session, we were doing it even better because we were able to kind of understand what their concerns was and their fears, specifically in the profession. I'll say, though, that one of the biggest difference that I found in those sessions, I don't know if you feel the same, is that when I decided to study the profession of architecture was in the late 80s, early 90s. There was a recession in the U.S. So most of the people that I talked to in the profession said, do not study architecture.
Right.
Everyone said, don't do it. It's too hard. You're going to make no money. And it's...
and many of the people that had studied architecture were not practicing architecture.
Well, actually, a good friend of mine, a good family friend, I went up to her and I said, hey, tell me about your journey as an architect. And she said, well, it's the best profession in the world. And when I asked her, where do you work? She said, well, no, I couldn't continue to work because I wasn't making any money at all. So now I've decided to sell water filters. And I was like, oh, no, this is not good. And then I asked someone else and they said, oh, amazing, a lovely profession. So what do you do? I decided to go back and work for my family selling crackers because I wasn't making any money. Now, those were the people who studied architecture and left the profession. But the other group were actual architects who were in the profession, and all but one basically said, don't do it. I remember asking my dad, as I going up to him and said, Dad, I don't think I'm going to study architecture because I'm not going to make any money. I don't know. So I'm going to study business. And my father was very thankful to this day because he said, no, wait. Don't jump to conclusions. I have a good friend of mine who's an architect and a professor. Let me take you to him, but also remember that I'm going to help pay for this university. So instead of worrying, why don't you go and start the profession? Start studying architecture. And if you don't like it, maybe you can make a different decision. And that was fantastic. So I did meet his good friend. I am lucky. Yeah. I'm one of the lucky people, right? And I met his good friend who was a very well-known architect who left Cuba and moved to Puerto Rico. And he had a successful practice. And he basically said, hey, listen, in order to be an architect, you need to love the profession. You can't tell anyone that if you don't love something, not to do it. And that was the first time I think I've ever heard someone tell me that you should do something because you love it.
Follow your passions.
Right. I never heard that before. I mean, now it's become kind of normal. People talk about passion, intent, having a
Purpose.
purpose.
Well, actually, I think that I'm happy to report that.
Yeah.
So we started our ADV sessions, our Advantage nights,
Right.
with a Kahoot, and we asked the students how many of them had been told not to study architecture, and the answer is like
Most of them
most
said
of them
no,
had not been.
except the people that were sons or daughters of engineers. That was weird. Or besides that, most were not.
Yeah.
And this is my point, that it was very different
Yeah.
back then. And you said it, you're I mean, I am lucky because my father and my mom were decided to just,
Support you.
support me. So in a way, I have to say that I've always felt the responsibility to try to support people that want to study the profession. Years ago, when I used to write my column in the newspaper,
Mhm.
I used to get emails from random people saying, "Hey, my son, my daughter wants to study architecture. Can you? What do you think about it? I don't think they should.
Can you talk to them?
Can you talk to them?" And it was completely random. I mean, imagine getting emails from people you didn't know, and I made an effort to actually talk to every single one or write them. And I think the best note I got, and you know this well,
Yeah.
was
I have all the notes.
You do?
Yeah, I keep them. I have a file.
You're such a hoarder.
I have a file of cards that bring me joy.
Oh, okay.
And it's
So do you keep any of mine?
I keep them. Yeah.
No,
Whenever you throw things out and I grab them and I
No, but
store
you
what
said
I
that you
want.
keep things that fill that you
Fill
with
me
joy.
with joy because it fills me with joy to give back to students who are wondering whether or not they should study the profession and
but
spending time with them.
I was wondering if you kept any of my cards. I'm hoping that they bring you joy.
Are you talking about cards like love letters?
Yes.
Yes, of course I keep those too.
Oh, and am I supposed to keep yours too?
You're not keeping mine?
I don't know. I should look into that. And then I'll get back to you.
I'm probably keeping them for you and you don't even know.
Okay, good. That's good. But anyway, no, yes. There was a message sent by this wonderful person 3 years later saying, "Hey, I don't know if you remember me, but over 3 years ago, I sent you a message and you sent me an email back. And I'm proud to say that my daughter now is in her 3rd year in architecture. And it was the best decision she ever made." And that was awesome.
That's
I mean,
awesome.
I was like, whoa, this is, and I think in a way, it reminds me of that experience when I was in high school and I wanted to study architecture and how disappointed and how quickly I changed my life's dream because everyone said not to do it. And
I remember someone told you he thought you didn't have what it takes.
That is a true story, yes. I don't know how he knew that.
He didn't really know you to tell you that you didn't have what it takes. So that's kind of unfair.
It was an architect, successful architect, who I went up to him and I said, "Hey, I want to be an architect. Can you tell me what you need to know in order for you to become an architect?" And he said, bluntly, "I don't think you have what it takes." I said, "Jesus, I don't know you." I mean, how do you know? It was so disappointing.
Yeah, but at the time you don't have this self-confidence in yourself. So you were like, well, maybe he knows something I don't know.
That's when I went up to my dad and I said, "I'm not going to be an architect." That's for sure. So
luckily your dad managed to persuade you to not give up on the profession.
No, not only that, I have to say that the whole responsibility topic that I mentioned before is because I understood words matter. And words from people that you either idolize or you respect could really, really affect decisions you make, especially when you're in high school, because you don't know any better. So in a way, that's why I made an effort to actually answer every single one of those messages. And, it was really rewarding when I got that message. So in a way, the Advantage Nights were an extension of the things that you and I have been talking about forever.
Yeah.
How can we better, educate people and direct them in the right, direction, I guess, so they can make the right decisions.
So what do the kids need to know? when they want to study the profession and or what are their skills that they should have or that they should try to acquire
You mean in
in
high school
college? Well,
or
no.
in college?
Well, I
Because
mean,
high school was yeah.
you start in high school, but it continues in college. But I think when you're actually looking for a job in the profession, you've graduated from college. So what do you think would be the most important skills they should have?
Well, I think that before we get into that, because we have a list here that I want to share of one of the blogs that you and I wrote. So before we go to that, I think it's important that people understand the differences between architecture and interior design. And that's what's actually, if you remember when we had the Advantage Night, people were, I think, enlightened a little bit when they realized that the differences of each one, and not everyone that studies architecture can be an interior designer or vice versa. So let's start with you. How would you describe the profession of
Interior design profession? Yeah. Okay, so I would say that interior design, what I love about interior design is that it's very comprehensive. So I love working with materials, with finishes. It's a field where you really need to stay up to date with current trends. Materials evolve constantly. In our case, for example, we're very in tune with sustainable design, and there's technology that's evolving daily in this field. So constantly exploring, learning about new materials, new methods, new technologies that you can apply into projects. That's one of the things that's the most exciting to me. And what I love about interior design is that you're working from the inside out.
Oh,
very cool. You're working from the inside out, but really from the perspective of the user. Who is going to be using the space? So empathy, I think, is I've taken one of those strength finder tests, and empathy is one of my top strengths. So I think that helps me at my profession, because you need to put yourself in the other person's shoes, understand whether it's if it's a residential client. So if it's a home that you're building, well, how is that home going to be used? What is the function? How many kids do they have? Do they have pets? Do they entertain a lot? Are they hermits? All these, it's a very intimate profession. You get to know the users of the space very well. But regardless, if it's a restaurant or if it's a retail store or if it's a hotel, if it's an office, you really need to understand how that space is going to be used so that your solutions in the design space are both functional and aesthetically pleasing. So it's very comprehensive in that sense. I think that you can talk about architecture. I won't talk about architecture for you, but I think that if you like to work with materials, with colors, with textures, if you're a more tactile person
and detail
oriented, very micro oriented, empathic, if you like to work with people, understand the human condition, I think that interior design is a great profession for you. That's not to say that you don't need that sensibility in architecture. Of course you do. But it's like you're closer to it.
Yeah.
In the
no, and by the way,
in the practice.
I think we mentioned it before, but there's a lot of misconception about the profession. As a matter of fact, I would say that interior design also includes a lot of project management.
Absolutely.
Yes. Traditionally, when you think of architects, you only think of designers. Interior designers not only design, they have to work from A to Z, not only on the conceptual design phase, but also on the operations and the FF&E.
And you have to understand,
have to manage the even the whole process of buying products.
You have to understand how to bring that vision to life. Right. So how to take it from A to Z, right. And a huge part of the job is actually materializing that vision. Because and even now with AI, AI can do a beautiful rendering for you, probably in a couple minutes or seconds now. But how do you bring that to life?
The implementation
You
part of it
you
is huge.
yes, you have to understand who are the suppliers, who's going to get this built, who's going to get this done for you,
And where the
so
materials are located, and especially if we're thinking from a sustainable standpoint,
supply
the
chains.
supply chain is huge, and the politics behind many of those materials, where they're sourced and so forth.
Absolutely.
And
fair trade,
yeah.
fair wages, so many things go into it. So there's things to consider. And also, of course, you're providing a service. So you need to use reputable suppliers with quality goods that will have a certain lifespan, that they're not going to break down within a day or so. And also that if something does go wrong,
how quickly can you restore it?
Exactly. Are they going to respond? Is the supplier going to respond for that mistake or not? Because ultimately, the interior designer, as the project manager, also ends up kind of taking a lot of the brunt of the responsibility.
Right.
So the client looks to the interior designer is like, oh, this table is crooked. Right. And so it's up to you, the interior designer, to go talk to the supplier to figure out why is it crooked? How can we get this resolved? How can we get this fixed?
The sourcing is something that in many cases, when you are in architecture, you put it all in the construction documents, and then a contractor is going to be the one sourcing that.
Right.
In interiors, most of the at the level of interior work that we do, the sourcing actually comes from the interior designer under the interior designer's team.
Yeah.
So,
and it's a way to maintain control also of the outcome of the output.
Right.
So yes, that is recommended.
And by the way, I know that and this is an important topic, because I think that there's perceptions of the profession that you choose colors and you do only decoration, and that is a different profession. Being a decorator is not the same thing as being an interior designer.
Absolutely.
And it's not that it's better or worse. It's just a different profession.
They're different. And there's different expectations, I think, of both.
Absolutely.
And I think it's important to clarify that difference, because clients, I think, sometimes get confused as well.
Oh, but they get confused even, with architecture.
Yes.
What is the responsibility of an architect? What is the responsibility of an interior designer? What is the responsibility of a contractor, and so forth? So
yeah. So yes, decoration basically will lead specifically with the colors, with fabrics, with loose furnishings. An interior designer gets into a lot more technical aspects within an interior space. They do have to understand and work closely with architects and other consultants, engineers, because if you're gonna move a wall, if you're going to hide HVAC equipment, etc.
There's more
codes.
I would
ADA.
say there are. I know some interior designers or some architects don't like this term, but I like the term interior architect. Because interior designers are interior architects.
I agree.
Because they need to understand not only the concepts of the design and how to implement it, but also they need to be able to coordinate with the electrical, mechanical, lighting, consultant in general. So I think that's, in a way, sets apart the profession from either decoration or architecture per se. Architecture, on the other hand, I think that if you say that interior design is focused in the micro, architecture is focused in the macro. And in my experience, I've seen very good architects who are great interior designers because they're really focused in that level of detail. The way I describe architects is basically kind of like a director of a film, not the producer. The producer is what it would be either the client or the developer, etc. But the architect is the director, so they need to direct a whole team of people, and they do have a vision. But again, it comes from a place of leadership and macro vision. You have to be a designer, but that doesn't mean that that's the only thing you're going to do as an architect. You could be a project manager, you could be a consultant, you could be many things within the profession. So, and I think that the biggest difference between architecture and design is that architecture is when you actually build a project. You become an architect when you build, or when you get something built. If you are a designer or there's an expression for years they've called it paper architecture, and that makes you an outstanding professional, maybe a great designer, but that doesn't make you a great architect. You need to know how to build in order to become great at something. I've always said that if you are a paper architect, you might be an excellent educator, and you might even, push the envelope in some of the areas in education and maybe
And design.
and design. But unless you build something, you're not truly going to become an architect. Now, does that mean that if you're not a designer, you can be an architect? My answer is yes, because you can. There's so many things you can do within the industry that are not only attached to actual design. Now, so that's why I kind of separate that expression. That one thing is to be a great architect, and another thing is to be an incredible designer, and they're two separate things.
Yeah. But usually in school, the emphasis is mostly on design. I know,
Right.
and that happens both in architecture and in interior design.
Right.
And
that was one of the main topics of the kids that came here.
Yeah.
Asking, hey, am I going to design for 5 years? I don't know how to draw. Is that going to make me a bad architect, a bad designer? So,
well, I think that's part of what school is supposed to do. So anyone can be taught how to draw. Those are skills.
Yeah.
You don't have to come into college knowing how to draw. That's what they're going to teach you. And of course, if you put in the time, put in the effort, try and sketch, and those are skills that you can acquire. And I think it's an important skill. That connection between mind and paper, right?
But I'll say this, because we got a lot of questions. If I don't know how to draw well, can I be a designer? Can I be an architect?
Yeah.
The answer is yes.
Absolutely.
Learning how to design is like any other skill. You might learn how to play basketball, but that doesn't make you a great basketball player. So I can teach anyone how to draw. There's no doubt in my mind. That doesn't mean that I'm going to teach them how to be great at drawing. Okay? So
that will require them practicing, putting in the time. It's like throwing the free throws.
Right. So if you don't know how to draw, or you think that you're not very good at drawing, that doesn't mean that you cannot be a great architect. I've worked with outstanding architects that are not really good at drawing, but they're really good at conveying their vision. And I think that drawing is one of the ways that you can employ in order for you to communicate that. Now, so the first thing is, do you need to be great at drawing? No, you don't, but you will learn to be adequate enough. Number 2, do you need to be good at math? No. And that is a misconception.
Totally. So I remember when I was at school, I wasn't sure if I wanted to study architecture.
Right.
And one of the deterrents for me was math. I hated math. And everyone told me I needed to be good at math.
You don't like it today.
Yeah, well, they told me I had to be good at math and physics, and I hated math and physics. Right. So I was like, I don't think I want to be an architect. I just don't.
Right.
And for some reason, at the time, I didn't know about interior design as a profession.
Right.
I don't know why. But
so how did you find out about it?
Much later. So I knew architecture. I knew I liked design. But I was introduced to architecture at a pre-college program, and I studied art history.
Okay.
I loved art history, so I said, I'm gonna go to college, do liberal arts. I'll major in art history since I know I'd like this, and I'll explore design on my own. That was my plan. So when I did my 4 years in college, I think I didn't really spend time exploring design. I was trying to get through college. And when I graduated, I had no idea what I wanted to do. So I ended up working at a jewelry store for a while, a designer jewelry store. And then you were the one who introduced me to interior design. You're the one who told me, why don't you you said, why don't you study architecture? And I said,
and you
no.
shut me down.
And then you said, well, why don't you take an interior design course? I'm like, I don't know. Well, I had never thought of that. And so I did, and I loved it.
Amazing. By the way,
genius.
Right, in my own mind. But one thing is, we were not dating.
No.
And we were not married.
Mm-mm.
So
You're my buddy.
Yeah, we're friends. Now, you studied that semester.
I did a semester locally in Puerto Rico, and I loved it. And so I decided to do my master's, and I applied to Pratt Institute in New York.
Which is actually pretty good
It was a great school. It was they had a qualifying program, which is for people like me who didn't have a portfolio.
Right.
Okay. And so I did a qualifying year where they taught me the basic skills. And then I did 2 years of my master's.
Well, I mean, I know it sounds a little funny, but architects in general sometimes assume that they could also be interior designers. And there's always this like kind of like, I don't want to say that interior designers are put down by architects, but I do believe that sometimes.
I think they are a little sometimes.
Often. Yeah, well, I mean, not me, but I do say, but it's true. I find that happens. And in a way, it's because when you're taught to be okay at everything, you assume that you could do it all. And that is a mistake.
I think it also has to do with what we discussed before, that they think of interior design as decoration,
Right.
just choosing colors and frosting, right? But if you're really working with a trained interior designer, they complement each other. Because each one comes at it from a different perspective. So interior designers think from the inside out. They think from the user, and that informs everything. And that's how they're taught to think. I think architects are taught to think macro, because you have to think of all these other things besides internally, inside out. You need to think outside in as well.
But by the way, you do have to think of which starts on the outside, and that is a problem. And by the way, I remember I had this conversation with a good friend of mine who's an architect, and I reminded him that the first piece of architecture, according to architecture history,
is Lascaux.
Lascaux caves in France. And what is that?
That's actually interior design.
Interior design. So, because as soon as you painted a wall and made it yours, made that cave yours,
right,
that's supposedly the first piece of architecture. So for all those architects out there that think that they're center of the universe, interior designers were the ones that created architecture. But anyway, that's a separate book. But so we know a little bit about interior design, architecture, and a couple of the things that came out during those activities we had with the kids it wasn't only what do I need to know in order to get to school. We talked about one of them, which is, do I need to know how to draw? You don't. Number 2, do you need to be great at math? No, you don't. And part of the reason is because you have, as an architect and interior designer, you work with a lot of people.
Yeah.
I don't need to be a lighting designer in order for me to design an office. I need to design an office and hire a consultant that work together with us as lighting designer. I don't need to be.
And some projects require that, and some projects don't.
Right, but again,
you take basic lighting design at school, or I know we did.
No, I know. But my point is that I will never design a structure.
Right.
I'm gonna work together with a structural engineer. Okay, I'm not gonna design the electrical system and the outlets. I'm gonna work with an electrical engineer with us to do it. And like I said before, as the director of the film, I'm going to take all the camera people, all the boom organize. I mean, everything that's involved in a movie, right? And put it together,
coordinate,
and work as a team. Because architects do not work alone in the same way that interior designers don't work alone. So it's a conglomerate. It's a way to collaborate.
So I would say that then, based on that, one of the huge skills is collaboration skills.
Being able to collaborate. And I think that there's something that there's a myth that we need to address, which is the suffering loner architect, not caring about making a dime, but
Howard
Rourke in the book, The Fountainhead.
Yeah.
Which is a struggling artist suffering to make something work, and that is a myth.
And that he has a vision that he needs to impose because he knows how people should live.
Right,
and that is a myth.
That is a myth, because and by the way, that is a little bit of an entitled myth. If you're an architect that thinks that you have the answers and you need to impose them to the society, well, in our, respectfully, we absolutely disagree with that, because I'm not going to tell other people how to live. I can improve the quality of life, but I'm not going to tell them that they should have 5 kids. I mean, that's not up to me to make that decision. So, and I think it's a good, segue to talk about the difference between being an artist and being a designer or an architect. An artist could be selfish. They could do whatever they want to do. But designers and architects serve other people. So if you
have to be selfless,
and you have to be selfless, and you have to be able to understand and analyze how people live, how people operate, how a company serves, in order for you to be a successful professional in our business.
I agree. I think that both our professions require servant leadership.
Correct. I absolutely agree with that. But as you and I know, part of what happens, going back to the Howard Rourke and the Fountainhead topic, is that, I think people idealize the profession, and they love to talk about the single branded star architect or star designer. Yeah. And that is a disservice for the profession.
Absolutely. But I think not to criticize the schools, but yes, I think both the schools and media have some to blame here about this, because the idea is that the media, just like the news, the news only wants to put, all the sensational, horrible stuff that's happening. The news, they don't want to tell you all the good things, because that doesn't sell. It's not sensational. So in the same way, the magazines, the design magazines, they want to feature things that are like completely different and out there, and that have that wow factor. And most architecture, most interior design is not that. It's actually very pragmatic. It serves particular users and their needs.
Right.
And it doesn't necessarily, it can be beautiful and functional and wonderful, but not be like,
I mean, my opinion,
a Frank Gehry building.
Well,
okay?
I mean,
there's very few star architects, really.
Correct. And there's nothing wrong with being that Frank Gehry. But let me put it like this. If you go to New York City, right? We're talking about New York City. And you go to the Guggenheim that was designed by Frank Lloyd Wright. Imagine if each building will be just like the Guggenheim on between 93rd and 81st on 5th Avenue. It will look like Brasilia.
Yeah, it wouldn't work.
Because it doesn't have the reason that building works is because it's framed by other buildings that are less sculptural.
Agreed.
So, and those are unique, and in those cases they work. But if you have 10 of those right next to each other, obviously the experience is different. But my point is that there's, in order for you to potentially be a good servant leader, and in this case, be a great designer or architect, you need to put yourself out of yourself. Meaning that, actually, I'll tell you this. One of the things I did in college is that I ended up studying philosophy and also architecture by chance. And the truth is that I didn't really even know what philosophy was until I got to school. And it helped me greatly, because in philosophy, they don't want to know your opinion about Plato. They want you to explain, what do you think Plato is trying to say? And that is a different narrative. So now, as an architect, I'm going to listen to the community, to the end user, to the client, and I'm going to try to understand what they're trying to say and become their vehicle to graphically describe their vision.
Facilitate. Or translate.
It. Now, and even make it better, because our job is not only to translate, is to translate and be aspirational, allowing them to be, wow, this is even better than I envisioned. And that's our role as professionals. So in a way, the idea of servant leadership is something that I've seen lately in different levels of education. The importance of purpose, the importance of leadership, and making a difference. And I think that that's going to start to continue that trend. But sadly, and as you know, I'm also a professor at the university level, I see that when it comes to architecture, they see design as the only way to actually create purpose and change the world. and that is incomplete.
I agree.
That is incomplete because you need to be able to know a couple things before once you graduate. And I think we can go very quickly on a list of some of those things. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, let's see. So, number one, technical proficiency. What do you think are some of those aspects that are key for people graduating and are trying to get into a professional setting?
So I'll use our firm as an example. So when the kids leave school, you've been taught some basic design skills, but you can't expect to be designing on day one necessarily.
Right.
So what can set you apart is to have those technical skills. So learn the computer programs that are being used in the industry. Right now, we use Revit here.
Yeah,
in the
we use
office.
BIM engineer. We use a bunch of them, including
we
BIM.
used AutoCAD. The industry has evolved now.
The last 10 years, we only use BIM.
It's basically Revit. There's a few projects that require AutoCAD still, so you still need to know AutoCAD, but that might change by the time the kids who are now in school are graduating. So I would focus on BIM. And some of the others, I would say get familiar at this point in time with AI and anything that can help you become faster and quicker.
But if you're an interior designer, I would say that it's very important that you know
SketchUp, Photoshop, Illustrator.
And by the way, the reason, adding to what you're saying, what do I mean by technical proficiency is that it's going to be very difficult for anyone graduating from school to be able to know how talented they are when it comes to design. Because you might be, again, a great designer, but you're not an architect yet because you haven't really built. So, the technical...
And when you design in school, you're designing for yourself. You're your own client.
Correct. You're not designing for someone else.
So you don't know yet whether you have that sensibility of understanding what the client wants and giving the client what they want or need.
Correct.
That's a skill that you will develop once you're in the profession.
So what are we looking for? Instead of only how good of a designer you think you are, the easiest thing is to be really good in Revit, in computer programs. Because
to be a quick learner, to be a proactive learner, someone who's resourceful, someone who figures these things out.
I know, but we're talking about technical proficiency. We're going in order. So you need to be good at computer programs because that's what you're going to be able to compare yourself against other people. Because you can compare portfolios when it comes to design, but at the end of the day, you don't know how good of a designer you are until you start in the process of actually learning the profession. Now, so I would say for anyone out there, learn AutoCAD, learn Revit, learn Photoshop, learn SketchUp. Those 4 things, okay?
Learn how to learn these things.
Those 4 things, those 4 things are going to put you ahead of the game when you come out of school. Now, the second thing we have here in our list is strong design and visualization skills. And in a way, what this means is that you have to be able to clearly communicate, and be visual. Because if you're not a visual being, you're not going to be a great professional.
It's a very visual profession.
It's a visual profession.
So even being able to identify other images or imagery to represent your ideas, and sometimes what you have in your mind or what you're picturing in your mind, you can't find an actual image that represents it. That's actually now with AI, you can probably create the image that you're thinking of, but finding it and using it as a visual communication tool, I think that's an important skill to have.
I agree. And I think I want to jump into communication because it's not only a graphic way to communicate by drawing or by being able to be competent in design.
Yeah.
You need to have effective communication skills, meaning that you have to practice how to present. Many times when people are in college, they're only focused in their graphics. I'm going to put the drawing out there and I'm going to have a crit with my professors and the drawing is going to speak for itself. No. You need to practice. If you're gonna draw something design something for a month for school, and you leave, and you only allow yourself 5 minutes to practice your verbal skills before the presentation, you're gonna fail. You need to spend the same amount of energy, okay, you spend actually doing the graphic images with the way you're gonna present it verbally. And I'll tell you a quick story. There's an architect X that we know very well that had to compete on RFP, and they were invited for a project in Florida, and they presented second. And then the first team that presented had a model, had drawings. It was incredible, and it was an excellent project. The architect that I'm referring to understood right away that their work was not up to par for them to win that RFP. So what he did is that he stood in front when it was time for him to speak. He stood in front of the
other company's work.
No, his
of his own
work.
work. Okay, sorry.
And he blocked the view of his drawings and basically said to the jury, you know what? We can look at our work and that's fantastic. But let's focus on you because you're the community I'm going to be designing to. And part of the problem is that I don't know you well enough. And we need to sit down, absorb your ideas, understand what your interests are, and then we're going to be successful together. And then he added, even though I don't know you well, I'm just like you because I grew up just like you with the same religious background in a community that was actually humble like them. And guess who won? The second one.
You won.
Not the first, because decisions,
are emotional.
97% of the decisions are emotional. And if you do not know how to communicate it verbally, and connect with the people, you're not going to be able to succeed. It doesn't matter how good your design and your graphics are.
Well, and we always say, I mean, most people don't know the difference between good and bad design.
Sadly,
designers and architects may know the difference because they study that and they're taught these things. But the everyday user, it's a very subjective thing. Yeah. And so you're not going to win on your design skills alone.
No.
You need to learn to communicate, articulate your ideas, and show your professionalism also in the field because this is a profession. It's not a vocation. And it's not a hobby either.
And it's a service.
It's a service.
And when you're serving someone else and they're paying for it, you have to serve in the best way possible. And making them understand that they have choices and they don't have to hire you. You said before, adaptability and willingness to learn. You got ahead of of myself because that's one of them. Adaptability and willingness to learn.
Yeah. So when we hire, I always think, I hire for attitude, basically. For attitude, adaptability, the skills we can teach you here in the office, etc. But I can't teach you attitude. I can't teach you a go-to attitude, a proactiveness, wanting to give the extra mile, wanting to learn
every single
day. Wanting to on your own explore. Okay, what are the skills that I need? What do I need to continue to evolve so I can add more value? That all has to come from the person. And so that's what we're looking for when we're hiring.
I agree.
And that's the best way to make yourself. I heard Obama speak on this once, and he said that the best thing that you could do was just be a person who gets things done.
Yeah.
Because if you're someone who gets things done, whatever you're asked for, no matter what it does, and you do it well, that signals that you're someone that can be trusted and that you can be given added responsibility.
Yeah.
And that's the case. I've seen that play out in our office multiple times with different people in different positions where they started in one position and then what we asked them to do, they did so well that then we asked them to do something else. Yeah. And they just continue to evolve and grow.
We have people here that started picking up phones as receptionists and now they're in charge of accounting.
Yeah.
And what it tells you is that if you have the right attitude, you could do whatever you want. You also mentioned teamwork and collaboration, which is one of the ones we have here in the list.
Yeah.
And then I guess the last one we have here before we end today's talk is problem solving and critical thinking. What do you think about that?
As designers, I think you are a solution provider. That is, you're basically solving problems through the built environment and space. So you need to have kind of like that design thinking mentality of like everything is a problem to solve, and how do we solve it? So and critical thinking.
Don't
Don't
accept
expect,
things.
yeah, don't you need to anticipate needs, anticipate what's needed, and come up with creative solutions, and
I you know,
that requires critical thinking.
it's an interesting line, because in a way you want to be critical in order to challenge the status quo, in order to go from good to great,
Mm-hmm.
but always doing it from a place of servant leadership,
Mm-hmm.
not only for the only for the purpose of actually enalting yourself. And I think that's
Constructive criticism.
correct. Correct. And I think that's in this profession that we've chosen, it is very important. So, I guess we started talking about the opportunity we had, with the students,
Mm-hmm.
and being able to actually give them some direction in order for them to say yes to our profession.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully today we're able to, through our own experiences too, give you guys some ideas on some of the skills that architecture and interior design firms are looking for. And I'm going to repeat them very quickly before we go, so people don't forget. But we talked about technical proficiency in a couple of computer programs, having visualization skills, obviously helpful, the importance of effective communication, and making an effort to practice and record yourself and speak and keep using verbal communication as a way to be able to communicate your work. Adaptability and willingness to learn is another one. Collaboration and teamwork. And lastly, problem solving and critical thinking. So if you
Awesome.
start thinking of some of those things, hopefully those will help you
In
your
this
next
and
level.
any profession.
I believe so. I agree. If you have any ideas or any ones that you think that we've missed, please write us, send us that email at
Inside Out at
advfirm.com. And we'll hopefully bring it up and tell everyone what we think of your ideas. Again, thank you so much, Cristina, for spending the time with your wonderful husband.
Thank you. So what do we say? Transformation begins from the inside out.
Thank you, guys.